Every day that I continue to be alive, there's one thing I regret doing: playing Dead by Daylight. But I'm here now and stuck perpetually, so let's talk about it. Wanna roll around in the worms with me? Well, it's not quite that simple. No, Dead by Daylight is a game that will grind you and your so-called feelings into dust and leave nothing but a cold, empty shell stuck in your racing chair. In many ways, it's the most immersive horror game I've ever played because every time I play Killer, I actually want to throw a hatchet through someone's skull. But if you're a FNAF fan just getting into the game or just someone looking to try out something new, let me be the first to welcome you. All jokes aside, Dead by Daylight can be an insanely fun game, where a lot of the joy comes from optimizing your playstyle and seeing it work in action. However, I wasn't kidding when I said it can leave you feeling pretty apathetic. It's a very difficult game on both ends when you're starting out. If you're a killer who doesn't know anything about looping or what perks to bring, have fun getting absolutely shit on until you learn about the movement keys that aren't W. And if you're a survivor, oh man, that may even be worse, since you'll probably be sent back to the lobby early a lot of times when you start out. Hell, even now I get sent back more times than not, and that's because despite the big number on my Steam profile, I'm still what we call bad at the game. But aside from the actual gameplay mechanics of DBD, there's a side of the game that you will eventually face: the player base. So I decided to assemble a little guide through socializing in Dead by Daylight. What to look for, what to look out for, and helping you realize that nobody who plays this game has a life. So take my hand, and let's begin. What better place to start than with gesturing? Gesturing is going to be the single most common way players communicate with each other throughout the trial, as this game lacks any and all voice chat. That's probably for good reason, which we'll get into later, but for now, just know that your teammate is not going to know that you found a generator unless he actively sees you working on it. So you might want to learn gesturing. On PC, you have a couple different ways to do this. The 1 and 2 keys on your keyboard will let you do one of 2 built-in hand gestures. One that's a pointing finger, and one that's a beckoning hand. If someone points, you follow that finger, and they beckon, you follow them. But then why is this guy showing me his swollen coin purse? Well, this is teabagging, infuriating on one side, absolutely necessary on the other. Sometimes the objective your teammate wants help with is going to be more complicated than go that way, so always keep an eye out for them sweet, sweet bags. For example, in this instance I'm working on a generator while injured, and this survivor wants to help me, so he'll gesture to me with his nuts to tell me to get off the gen so he can heal me. This is a successful bagging gesture, but there is another kind of gesture: nodding. Because your camera is actually linked to the direction your character's head is facing, you effectively have full control of your neck. This means nodding or shaking your head is as simple as up and down or left and right. Use this method to give approval or stern rejection to your teammates. And of course, with the release of the Dungeons & Dragons chapter, we got an entirely new method of gesturing: lute playing. A specific perk attached to Ashtray and Bearmar will allow you to pull out a lute and play a sad song. This is mostly something players will use as a gag when something bad happens to a teammate or when they themselves are doomed. It's just a fun little, it is what it is. But gesturing is not just something survivors can do. Killers are also capable. Similar to survivors, killers can communicate by nodding. While most encounters with a killer will probably end something like this, sometimes a killer will want to be nice and approve. I sometimes like to give nodders when a survivor plays a loop around me very well. You know, just a little compliment, because in this game, that can be kinda rare. But some killers, especially Ghostface, can communicate those teabags right back at you. The Pig, Hag, and Demo can also sort of do this, but nowhere near the level of Ghostface, so he's gonna go up about 3 tiers on the list. When a killer does it, there's a good 90% chance it's to taunt, 10% chance it's Ghostface having a crisis episode, and taunting is a huge part of socialization in this game that we will get to. Don't you worry. For now though, we've covered the basics of gesturing. There are definitely some more advanced techniques. For example, this survivor just told me he fucked my mom, but this video is not the guide for you if you want to learn how to do that. Instead, we're moving on to the most open form of communication in this game: the Endgame Chat. There is also a pre-game chat, but what exactly are you going to talk about with these bozos before you've even played with them? The endgame chat is special for a few different reasons. First off, you've already played the match, so everyone here is pretty much at their peak level of hating each other. Second, you finally get to see what perks the other side was running, which is usually some combo of Dead Hard, Decisive Strike, Unbreakable, Fuck My Ass if you're a killer, or whatever gimmicky killer build of the week it is if you're a survivor. Last I checked, it was Franklin's Weave, and that's not a GTA 5 hairstyle, believe me. The third reason is it's the only time when the killer can openly communicate with the survivors. So be warned, because while I'd say most players I go up against are level-headed people who will say GG after a good game, not everyone is like that. The Endgame Chat is notorious as being DBD's salt dump, and that's on both sides of the spectrum. Or at least it would be if it weren't for one cool trick survivors don't want you knowing about, but we'll get to that later. Sometimes a game doesn't go someone's way. Maybe they teabag too many pallets only to get cucked by Blood Warden at the very end. Sometimes games just turn around, and if that happens, start chugging water to offset the sodium you're about to ingest. I've had players tell me I suck or that I need to take a shower, but sometimes it goes beyond the simple trash talk. I've had players be homophobic towards me because I used a pride flag as my profile badge. The funny part? Behavior never banned that count, because behavior just fucking doesn't do that. The endgame chat should ideally be used for GGs all around, or if you're in a good mood, GGWP. Or good game, well played. Instead, you'll be finding GG easy from the guy who used distortion, iron will off the record, and bite the bullet so he could wait until his teammates died so he could get the hatch. So the endgame chat can be totally volatile. Expect to have your perks assessed and judged, expect to have your profile be scanned and reported, expect the worst thing you can expect. The reason I have my Steam profile set to private is because I don't want people other than my friends leaving snarky comments or reviews. I mean, chances are if you're looking at someone's Steam profile after a match of DBD, you weren't there to make friends with the guy. So that's the endgame chat, and along with gesturing, that covers the basics of communication. But socialization is much more than just communication. It's about integrating yourself into a role that best fits your needs and the needs of the team. So let's talk the do's and don'ts of Dead by Daylight playstyles. Let's start with Survivor. Do act altruistically. Your teammates are going to be counting on you to get them off a meat hook or save them from the killer. Wait for the killer to leave the area and get your buddy down. It's best to make sure you do this while the killer is chasing someone else so you also have time to heal them under the hook. Don't farm someone off a hook in the killer's presence. If the killer hasn't left the area, this is an absolutely terrible idea. 9 times out of 10 what happens is someone goes down really quickly, and that may even be the survivor who just got unhooked. You're effectively condemning them to another hook state because you went for the rescue too early. Do generators. These are your main objective and will supersede almost everything. If your teammates are in chase, you should be on a generator so that's not time wasted. Don't focus on totems or chests if no one is working on a generator. That said, be prepared for when a generator is about to be done. Don't try to stack everyone on a single gen. This is because one of the strongest methods survivors have against killers is to split up and divide the killer's task. Stacking so many people on a generator means the killer has one place to go, and one goal in mind. So if you see 2 people working on a generator, don't add yourself to that stack unless the last survivor is in chase. Otherwise, you're just a dinner bell waiting to be rung. Do take chase and body block for survivors close to death. This is pretty self-explanatory, sometimes you just have to be a hero. Don't completely fuck your teammates by dropping pallets in front of them during chase. Even more self-explanatory. Now, let's start killer. Do try to spread an even pressure throughout the match. This will mean no survivor feels very safe when you're nearby. Sometimes this is pretty difficult to do, but it's a snowball effect that makes the back half of the game incredibly risky for survivors and incredibly profitable for you. Don't avoid going after people who you've already hooked. Don't ignore a survivor on a generator just because they've been hooked already, because the best pressure survivors can feel is turning it from a 4v1 to a 3v1. You don't have to bend over backwards to get that pressure. If the survivors are willing to just hand you the same player over and over, take them. Do play to your build strengths. When it comes to killer builds, there's a lot of variety. For example, the Doctor works great with an impossible skill check build. This is a build centered around making sure survivors are consistently missing skill checks because of their difficulty. However, this build really only works if you play into the Doctor's power and zap as many people as possible as much as possible. Find the synchronicities and make them work. Don't force the synchronicities. Sometimes it's best to just shift trajectory. For example, let's say your stealth build isn't working well on the unknown. Then it may be best you lean away from that stealthy gameplay style and shift to a more overtly oppressive one. Being able to adapt to the match as it continues is a huge skill needed for killer. Do take advantage of survivor mistakes. They happen more often than you'd think, as you'll find survivors unclear of their placement or messing up a clear vault. Survivor mistakes are your best power-ups. Don't gloat. Being real, all the power in the match lies in the killer's hands, and by that I mean the power to send other players back to the lobby. In this instance, don't be overly cheeky or mean-spirited, and that seems as good a time as any to learn the word of the day. Respect. Everyone you play with the exception of cheaters or exploiters, deserves some base level of respect. Just because Leon goes down in 5 seconds doesn't mean he doesn't deserve a GG well played at the end of the game. And just because Trapper didn't get a single bear trap off doesn't mean he doesn't deserve it either. Both sides at the end of the day are one and the same. They're players trying to have a good time in this game. It's within your power to respect this. and you absolutely should. But being real, not everyone has this mindset. Just because you want a good match doesn't guarantee you'll have one. So let's take a look at some of the behaviors you should be looking out for in this game. Taunting. Taunting is nothing new to DBD. It's been around for as long as 8-year-olds have learned that squatting over an opponent's body in COD looks like you're doing something mommy and daddy think is inappropriate. But in DBD, for some reason, it just feels more frustrating. This game can be very stressful, and a lot of it comes down to luck, which is why I think taunting feels more bullshit than in other games. If I get outplayed in Fortnite, I can reflect and continue with my day. But if I get teabagged at every pallet by a meg with more ping than I have money in my bank account, yeah, no, that kinda sucks. And teabagging the other side is the main way you'll experience in-game taunting nowadays. Actually, another kind of taunt was only recently removed from the game. Flashlight clicking. This was loud, annoying clicking from survivors that taunted the killer during chase and didn't provide any benefit otherwise. It was just meant to aggravate the killer and get their attention. While you could call that strategic, I think if your strategy involves taunting the other side, you should find other strategies. For the killers who can't teabag, there is another form of taunting called humping. This just means positioning yourself behind a down survivor and pressing W and S to move back and forth, simulating, well, you know. Humping is actually seen as more controversial than teabagging for reasons that kind of boggle me, because they are essentially one and the same. They get the same message across at the very least. The reason given is that it can be triggering to survivors of SA, an acronym I will not be describing. That's a fair argument for sure, but if you are against humping for this reason, I also have to ask, are you against teabagging? Now, I don't really care where you stand on humping and teabagging, but I do think it should be consistent. In any case, it's still definitely taunting. Disconnecting. Now, I have to be upfront, I am guilty of this myself on multiple occasions. Where you stand on disconnecting can range. In my opinion, if you're not having fun anymore, it's valid to stop playing. If you're getting too heated or just don't want to keep going, I think it's perfectly valid to just stop. With that being said, DBD is a terrible game for this. If you want my opinion, I think both sides should be allowed to forfeit at any point in the match, keeping themselves from earning any blood points while letting the other side keep theirs. But that's just not how the game works. Disconnecting has a number of consequences attached, the first being the dreaded DC penalty. This is the only consequence that affects the disconnector, giving them a timed ban that increases in length the more frequently they disconnect within a time span. When a killer disconnects, the game is over and survivors walk away with their blood points while the killer gets nothing but the ban. But Survivor is different, and in my experience, much more common. Survivors tend to give up over everything. As a killer, when I give up, it's usually not because of one bad game, but because of a series of bad games. And I'm not gonna lie, every time I do DC, I do sort of hate that I allowed myself to get mad enough to do that. But with survivors, I've noticed that they will give up literally if you pick a killer that they don't like. Here's an example. This ace player gave up immediately after one hook stage on the Nostromo wreckage map. Why? Because I was playing a Skull Merchant, a character that a lot of survivors just don't like facing at all. If I recorded every Skull Merchant match I've ever had, I would promise you at least half of them would have one or more survivors disconnecting, or giving up on hook. That is an egregious example, but far from the only one. It happens when I play a Xenomorph, Wraith, Clown, or any killer really. But aside from Skull Merchant, I'd say the number one killer I've had people DC on me over is Vecna. When this killer came out, survivors found his powers to be pretty bullshit, especially when he hit the live servers. If you were there, you'd find that there was a practical never-ending stream of hate towards Vecna's abilities, which include lifting pallets at will and hitting players with projectile attacks. With all that being said, Vecna is not an unbalanced killer in my opinion. In fact, I think he's actually on the weaker side of things, with his powers only really being useful once you put the time in to learn them all. It's different than the instant gratification Huntress Hatchet will say. But when I played Vecna after he initially came out, I was having a survivor disconnect almost every game. When a survivor disconnects, they're replaced by a bot, so not all hope is fully lost when they DC. I think this is the reason why they do it so often. They know that leaving won't end the game for their allies, they still have a fighting chance. But not really, because bots are terrible and can be outsmarted by most killers, except for Ghostface. They see him through walls and can instantly reveal him. They suck. These are, in my opinion, two of the biggest reasons why DBD can be deemed a toxic game, or one that has a lot of toxic elements. It's just that the developers have not implemented ways to de-escalate the fumes that start to burn up in people's faces when a match becomes unwinnable for them, or in some cases even unfair. But there are other smaller cases that I think I should tell you and warn you on in the future. Let's start with killer playstyles. Basement Bubba. This is more of a meme build now, but it's one of the oldest and most notorious playstyles ever created in DBD. Bubba, or Leatherface, is a killer who has an insta-down ability, whose only real limit is the map itself. Since the basement and Killer Shack are so open, They're pretty optimal places for Bubba to hook someone. The idea then is to hook them in the basement and use the perk Insidious. This allows Bubba to be undetectable for as long as he stands still, giving him the perfect opportunity to just lie in wait. When someone tries to unhook the survivor in basement, Bubba has them both, especially since his insta-down ability lets him chew right through the off-hook endurance state. Would I call this a toxic playstyle? Not really, since it's so easily countered by staying away from the basement, but it's one I would watch out for whenever I face a Bubba. Tombstone Myers. This is the biggest example in the game of a killer needing an update and behavior just refusing to do so. Michael Myers has 2 Tombstone piece add-ons that enable him to pick up and kill a survivor at will, regardless of their health state or hook stages. They're easily some of the most busted add-ons in the game and have no real counter. The best you can do is hop in a locker and force a grab, as this will force Michael to hook you and gives you a somehow better shot at escape in the long run. I think the reason behavior hasn't changed Tombstone Myers is because of the achievements tied to killing all 4 survivors in this method. In a way, it would be retroactively taking the pudding spoon out of veteran killers' mouths. Exploit Chucky. This is a more recent addition with Chucky having been added to the game, but it's been discovered that if Chucky uses his slice and dice ability on certain walls, it just never seems to end. This is especially useful if combined with the add-on that allows you to see survivor auras while slicing and dicing. It's free aura reading attached to a broken ability, making it totally uncounterable. Exploits in general are nothing new to DBD, but this is one in recent memory that I felt I should bring up. Tunneling and camping. These are 2 incredibly common killer strategies as they're often seen as necessary, especially at higher MMR rankings. The idea behind these 2 strategies is all about applying that maximum pressure. Killing someone early on makes for an easier game in the long run, and camping entices other survivors to reveal themselves, yet another good way to get pressure started. But because these methods are often seen as mean-spirited or toxic, they have a pretty nasty reputation. Luckily, as a survivor, you have a number of methods to protect you from being tunneled, including perks like Off the Record or Decisive Strike. In the long run, I think you'll learn that sometimes you'll be tunneled and that's okay, and you'll be camped and that's okay too. But it is a very hard pill to swallow the first time it happens. Chase build survivors. These are survivors whose whole goal is to get you to chase them and waste as much of your time as possible, while their team completes the main objective. You can tell who is a chase build survivor because they will let you know. What makes a chase build survivor? Well, you have windows of opportunity, and that's basically the only constant, as these guys want to spend every pallet on the map on you within 5 seconds. A little joke I like to make is that you can always tell when a survivor has windows of opportunity equipped because they'll always run in a really weird pattern to whatever the next bright yellow thing is that they can see. Top it off with a couple sprint bursts or a dead hard and you've got yourself one primetime headache in the making. The best counter to someone with a chase build is pretend you don't care about them, and go after the survivors with less aggravating builds. Only chase the chaser when you have to. Remember, their objective is to waste your time, but they very likely won't be alone as they pair very well with our next playstyle. Safe build survivors. You can expect some Champion of Light, Residual Manifest, Background Player, and maybe even Flashbang, all with a souped up flashlight that looks like it came out of MTV's Cribs. These guys just want one thing: to blind the killer when he gets a pickup or just whenever they can. They can be recognized in a couple different ways. Number 1, they'll get injured very early on and you can hear them breathing right in your fucking ear right before you pick someone up, so you can turn around and get a twofer. Another way you'll be able to recognize them is the continuous teabags right from a couple of D-bags. But safe build survivors are kind of a blessing for killer, because they put so much time into making a build to combat you in a game where they can't really combat you in a meaningful way. If you're chasing someone and down them, that person trying to get the save might fail, and then they'll just be the idiot who wasn't on a generator. Immersed survivors. They bring Distortion, Calm Spirit, Iron Will, and you won't be seeing them for most of the game, if you see them at all. Their whole thing is stealth, and that means yes, they will be letting teammates die, and yes, they will be waiting for Hatch, and yes, they did bring a map offering to spawn Hatch in the Killer Shack. This is also probably the only survivor type that other survivors hate to play with because they are the worst thing you can be in this game. A coward. They don't take risks, they don't try to help, they just want to hide in the locker and wait for the game to be over. I can't wait for the DBD Rotten Vegetables update so everyone can collectively throw tomatoes at these players. Bully squads. These are squads of survivors whose only goal in life is to cause misery. These survivors can usually be identified by the 4 different Twitch usernames, 4 flashlights, and the fact that they'll bring map offerings. Jokes aside, bully squads are probably the least fun types of survivors to play with. They aren't focused on the objective, their goal is to make you, the killer, super mad and even DC. The only way to outplay a bully squad is to not let it get to you. Chances are these guys are so invested in making you feel bad that they'll be terrible at covering their own asses. Bringing a Mori also helps a lot as they don't want you to get any hooks. But there is one type of player that both killers and survivors both suffer from: cheaters. Be aware of hackers, both the subtle and the not so subtle. The subtle cheaters will give themselves wall hacks and slight speed boosts, while the not so subtle ones will instantly kill every survivor in the map with a pig trap while playing nurse. While hackers aren't as prominent now as they once were, they're definitely still a species that every day sows more and more discontent. Recently, there was a cheater who streams their breaking of TOS on Twitch, and he was clowned on pretty heavily because despite his cheating software, he was beaten by regular survivors holding him hostage in a locker for the entire game. Cheaters will forever be the jokers of Dead by Daylight. No one likes them and they think they're actually funny, when in reality the only joke being played is on themselves. I mean, they actually pay a fee to cheat. How fucking pathetic do you need to be to not just cheat in an online game, but to have to pay for it? Just wild stuff. And there you have it. With all this knowledge crammed inside your itty bitty brain, you're now ready to get into the world of Dead by Daylight and nod your way to victory. Just be sure to bring the best perks and never apologize for anything ever. Only you can create your own fun, so do whatever you like. You want to be a chase survivor, go right ahead. You want to teabag as Ghostface, suit yourself, be whatever you want to be. Unless you're an immerse survivor, then go fuck yourself. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see other DBD content from me, check out this video on screen now. I'm Demuted, be sure to subscribe, and peace.